Welcome to Tenant Screening, how to find the best tenants in 5 easy steps. My name is Nelda Schulte, and suspiciously, my business is also called Nelda Schulte, but .com. I'd like to thank you for joining me today. And I'm going to share my screen with you. There we go. It seems to be very flashy right now. Okay, so welcome again, and thank you for joining me. I like to help people and support them. And my name again is Nelda Schulte. And I got into helping people with landlording because back when I was working as a music teacher with a low income and a big student loan, I really didn't think it was possible for me to ever own a house. Um, but what I ended up doing, welcome, Michelle. What I ended up doing was I started attending seminars. And the seminars taught me about how to house hack or how to buy a property where I can live in one part and I can rent out another part. And that kind of made a big light bulb go off in my head. That made me think, oh, I can do this. I can figure this out. I can make it work for me. I can afford it. And so I started saving up my money over the years. And then I bought my first property when I was in Fort McMurray. And of course, I had all kinds of problems because I was a newbie and I didn't know what I didn't know, and I made lots of mistakes. And that's why I started neldaschulte.com, because I want to help property investors who are self-lending to bypass some of the landmines that I stepped in when I was a landlord. Because let's face it, in real estate, if you make mistakes, they're expensive, you can be fined, all kinds of bad things can happen. So it's really good to kind of bypass that right from the very beginning rather than have to go through all that stress and pain. And if you're wondering what qualifies me to teach this course, I can let you know that I ran a property management business for 5 years. We moved it online in 2021. And I've also been a property investor and a do-it-yourself landlord for the last 18 years. We have properties in Alberta and BC, my husband and I, and we self-manage them. And I also worked for the Real Estate Council of Alberta, or RECA, and that is the legislative body that governs all real estate in Alberta. So anyone who wants to work in real estate has to have a license by passing exams and qualifying tests through the Real Estate Council of Alberta. And I worked as a writer, writing the content and writing the tests and the quizzes for the qualifying exams. So I know my way around the real estate arena. I also have a website that you can access. It's got lots of free resources that I post on it every week, at least 2 new articles. I also do polls, questions. Sometimes tenants will text me questions or problems that they're having, or you can post anonymously if you have a problem that you want the group to help you with, and your identity is protected. So the real estate Facebook group is called the Real Estate Investment Resource Network, and you just have to answer 3 questions to get in, and it's there to help you and support you. It's got lots of free information. Also, I have a Twitter account at Nelda Helps Me, where I post information every day, and I have a free membership site for those of you who would like to access even more resources. And you can find that on my website, www.neldaschulte.com, and it's membership. You just click the green membership button and you're good to go. So if you're in one of these 3 categories, you're in the right place. If you have no experience, you're in the right place. If you have some experience and you've had mixed results with the kinds of tenants you brought in, you're in the right place. If you're very experienced, and frequently there are people who take my courses who are extremely experienced, 20 and 30 years, and they take the course because they want to pick up a couple of new tips. And so that's great. Also, if you have tips that you want to share, you can. You can post your comments in the private chat and I can answer them, or your questions. So Whether you're just starting out, you have no idea what you're doing, this is the right place for you. I'll walk you through step by step. If you've had mixed results, the step by step will show you what you can do to correct and get on the right track to get good tenants. And if you're really experienced, I'm hoping you'll pick up a couple tips, or you can share some of your tips with me. So what we're going to cover today is how to advertise, what you can and you can't say, how to pre-screen tenants, what to put on an application form, what information you need to collect from tenants, the kinds of reference checks that you can conduct and how to conduct them, and how to make sure that your references are legit, and how to run a credit check, and a little bit on what to look for in a credit check. So we're covering a lot in 45 minutes to an hour, so buckle up, got lots of stuff to do. But I'm going to start by telling you about Paul, not his real name, of course. But when I had a property management business, I would frequently get calls, and now I get texts and private messages from distressed landlords. And unfortunately, Paul was one of these distressed landlords. He had bought a really nice property that he had divided up into an upstairs suite and a downstairs suite. So he turned this property into a suited property, and he put about $100,000 into the renovations. And he wanted this property to be his nest egg in his retirement. He worked full time. And he had pretty good luck renting to one set of tenants, but the second set of tenants who were renting his downstairs suite told him that they were poor students, they needed a break, they had a really good cry story, they pulled on his heartstrings. He let them in without having to fill in an application form, without checking references, without checking credit. And they were causing him endless problems. They weren't paying their rent, they were complaining, they said they were going to sue him. They seemed to know the Residential Tenancy Act really well, and he didn't know it at all. And so he was kind of pulling his hair out, wondering what to do to get rid of them. So I said, well, Paul, can we just backtrack a little bit? Can I just ask you what you did before they came in? Because that will influence how I answer your question about how to get rid of them, how to proceed. And he said, sure. So I said, did you have to fill in an application form? And he said, no. I said, did you check their landlord or their work references? And he said, no, I didn't. And I said, did you run a credit check? And he said, no, I didn't do that. And I said, do you mind if I ask why you didn't do any of those things? And he said, well, I didn't want them to think I was a jerk. And I said, but Paul, you work as an engineer. You've applied for lots of different jobs. There's an application process when you apply for a job. You know, there's an application you have to fill in. They ask you for references. They ask you for work samples. Do you consider employers a jerk for asking you all those questions? And he said, well, no, of course not. That's part of the process. And I said, well, your landlording business is a business, and your screening needs to be part of your process. And if people think you're a jerk, let them move on, because good tenants don't think you're a jerk by making you have them jump through all those hoops, so that you hand over the keys of your $300,000, $400,000, $5,000, $1 million property to them. They have to qualify. And that's something that you need to do. So I said, don't worry, you will get rid of your tenant. There will be an end in sight for getting rid of the bad one. But now we need to back up, and we need to go over the process that you need to put in place so that you only get good tenants from here on. And that's what tonight's session is all about. So what are we going to cover? Well, we're going to start with advertising, who you want as tenants, what online platform to advertise in, or maybe your city or town doesn't need an online platform. Maybe you advertise in a paper. More on that later. How to write your ad to attract tenants that you want. How to check comparable properties so that you know that you're pricing your property appropriately. How to post your ads. How to monitor the results, and then how to tweak it so that you're attracting the tenants you want for the price you want. And we'll talk about all these in more detail in a little bit. So first step of the 5-step tenant screening process is, who do you want as a tenant? And then you have to choose an online platform that's known and used by tenants. And then you need to write the ad to attract the tenants that you want. So I'm just going to fast forward here to an advertisement. So this ad, I'll tell you a little bit about this ad, why I'm posting this ad, and then I'll back up and tell you how I got to write this. So this ad talks about an empty nester, and I know not everyone's familiar with that term. That means when a couple have children that are adults and they've moved out of the house, then that couple is called an empty nester. So basically, you're appealing to seniors, but you're not exactly saying that they're seniors because you can't really do that legitimately in an ad. So we advertise this property to appeal to seniors. We talked about all the amenities that were very close by because that's very important to seniors. They want to be close to their doctor, their dentist, the pharmacy, the grocery store. They want it to be like 5 minutes away, and it was. I also talked about the green space because they're going to be home more often than people who are going out to a job every day, and they want to look at something beautiful. And this was a beautiful area. So back to know who your tenants are. Every property in every neighborhood has a specific kind of tenant that will work really well in that property. For instance, if you have a bachelor suite condominium, it's obviously going to be for one person or a couple who are used to small spaces. If you have, for instance, this townhouse in a senior facility that restrict people by age group, obviously your tenants can be a couple or a single person within a senior category. If you've got a beautiful house in the Northwest with a great big backyard and it's got tons of space, obviously your tenant profile would be a family, maybe even a family with a dog, if it's got a fenced yard so that the dog doesn't get out and it can play in the backyard. So every property has a profile, and you need to figure out which kind of a tenant would be best for your property, or which type of tenants would be best for your property, and then gear your ad towards that. So when you're talking about the property, you're talking about it from the tenant's perspective, and you're walking them through the property and showing it to them from their own perspective as either a family, a single person, whatever. And then after you've done that, you need to post it someplace. And we'll talk about that in a little bit too. So this ad was furnished or unfurnished, 3-bedroom, 2.5 bathroom in beautiful Mackenzie Town. Now that particular area that this townhouse was in attracted young families, like small families with 2 kids, one child. And we advertised talking about the schools close by, recreation facilities close by. It's got ice skating rinks, gyms, everything. So that's the kind of thing a family would really be interested in. So the ad was geared towards a family. And that's exactly who we attracted when we advertised this property. We got a small family who rented the condo long-term, or no, townhouse. Now you do have to be careful, a word of warning, you have to be careful in your wording because there are certain things that you can and you can't say that could be a violation of the Human Rights Act. So the reason I put this spaghetti monster up here is because if you say no spaghetti monsters in your ad, you're violating a human rights code and it could get you into trouble. Not because there's a real spaghetti monster, but because you have to be careful that your ad doesn't exclude anybody based on race, religion, sexual orientation, or any of the other grounds that are specified in the Human Rights Act. And I'll show you some examples because I was a little confused when I read that. So here is the Human Rights Act. There is the website. So if you just type into Google www.albertahumanrights.ab.ca, it'll pop up and you can read through that very long document that specifies the grounds that you have to adhere to for the Human Rights Act. And real estate renting is under the Human Rights Act. Okay, what should you not say? If you say adult building or not suitable for children, then you're excluding people who are not adults, not children. So it's exclusive language and you can't really say it in your ad. If you're saying must have working income or must provide proof of income or employment, then you're excluding people who don't have a working income or proof of employment. And by the way, I've had a number of tenants who were working, they were trust fund babies, they had inherited a bunch of money, or they got a divorce settlement, and they didn't have proof of employment, but they could provide you with proof of income. More on that later too. If you say seeking mature couple, then you're excluding people who are not considered mature. If you say ideal for a quiet couple, then you're excluding anyone who isn't a couple. Single professional, you're excluding people who aren't single. Perfect for female, that's a bad one because then you're excluding males. And you're also specifying gender, and you can't do that. If you're saying suits mature couple or individual, there again, it's exclusive language and not allowed. Great for working folks or students. Well, there again, that's another, you're saying that they must have proof of employment, which is discriminatory. Not soundproof implies that children are not allowed because children are usually a little bit on the noisy side as being kids. If you say no pets and the person has a service animal, then that could be considered exclusive as well. So just a side note, pets do not fall, or service animals do not fall under a pet policy. They fall under the Human Rights Code. And you can ask them to show licensing to prove that they do have a service animal, and they can provide that to you. But if they do have a service animal and you have a no pet property and they're non-sighted and they need that service animal to function in their day-to-day life, you cannot refuse them. So in Alberta, people are not really looking through ads and trying to sue landlords, but it might get that way because in Ontario, this does happen fairly regularly. I know of a woman who, she posted something on her ad that was exclusive. I think she was specifying she wanted a certain religious type of family to live in her property because that was the same as her religion. And she got sued for $100,000. So it's just best not to go there. Just watch that your language is not excluding anyone and you should be fine. So what we've talked about so far, just to summarize, is who you want to attract. You've got a profile of your tenant and you're writing your ad to attract that type of person or that family. You're going to write your ad to attract them in a way that is coming from their perspective. And then you're just making sure that the language that you use in your ad doesn't exclude anybody. Okay, now you're ready to calculate the rental rate. And this is a good place to start because you want to make sure you can have the best property in the world, the best wording, the best pictures, the best everything. But if you're priced out of the market, no one's going to call you. So the best way to do this is to go on to some of these landlord-tenant platforms such as Rent Board or Rent Faster. I'm going to take you through Rent Faster because it has a really good system for discovering comparable rent. And then we'll go through the process here and you can see how you can do it with one platform. So this one, you go into Rent Faster as a landlord. And then you specify the area. So if you can see here under community, I specified Bridgeland, and then the two neighboring communities are Renfrew and Mayland Heights. So this is in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. So you can search by the area with that filter, and then you can specify your area, and then you fill in the filters, for instance, 2 bedrooms, garage, whatever, and then you click search, and then up will pop all of these properties. And then you can click on the individual properties to find out what exactly they offer and compare it to yours and ask yourself, is this property newer, older than mine? Does it have more amenities, less amenities? Does my property have more things than it has? Like, does it have a bigger yard or a fenced backyard or a double garage or whatever? And then you'll kind of get a ballpark of what people are charging for a similar property. But you can take it farther. So for instance, this one, I input in the information a condo, 2 beds, 2 bathrooms, and unfurnished in these 3 areas. And then I filled in all of the filters. And then once you've done all of that, there's this neat little tool in Rent Faster, and it's called the pricing tool. So you have to set up an account to access it as a landlord, but it doesn't cost you anything. So you can go into the pricing tool, and it does this great job for you finding what the number of rentals in the communities you chose are the minimum price, the maximum price, and the average price. So it's an extremely useful tool. And of course, you can search other platforms that might have something similar, but I didn't see too many of them that had this kind of level of detail that Rent Faster had. So that's a really good way to check kind of general pricing for what your property should be at before you advertise it. So once you've got all that information in and you've chosen a price, then you're ready to post your ad. You've got pictures, so you can input all your information and pay a fee, press publish, and then you'll start getting views. So that's what this area is here. It'll show you today's views, this week, this month, and the total views. And depending on what's going on with your views, I'll show you how to tweak the ads so that you're getting tenants, good tenants. So I found that one of four things usually happens once you post an ad. You either get lots of views but no emails. You get low views and no emails or calls or texts. You get tons of calls, showings and appointments, and maybe a ton of application forms, maybe too many. And then you could also get lots of appointments but no applications. So what are you going to do with these so that things go in your favor? If you get lots of views and no calls, one of the first things to do is drop the price. Now, it doesn't have to be $50, it could be $25. I wouldn't go any lower than $25, but sometimes just dropping the price a little bit makes people attracted to your property, because people look for properties firstly in the area that they want to live in, and then on the price. They're obviously not going to choose a property that's way over what they can afford. They're going to have to work with a budget. So just dropping the price a little bit sometimes makes a huge difference. And you get tons of calls and showings and appointments, like a friend of mine did, and she had way too many applications, and she was thinking, what in the heck am I going to do with this? I don't have time to process 15, 20 applications. Then that's a happy dilemma, and you can raise the price. So I think she raised it by $150. So she did end up finding great tenants who were willing to pay more money, and then she had fewer applications. So rather than sifting through 15 applications, she only had to sift through 3 or 4. What happens if you get low views? So people are not attracted to your advertisement. What are you going to do? Well, a couple things you can do. One of them is you can change the main picture. So all ads ask you to post a main picture, and then you have supporting pictures. Frequently, people like to see the front of the building, the front of the house, but not always. Sometimes something else might appeal to them. So you can change the picture, your main picture. The other thing you can do is you can drop the price. Or if you think that the price is really good and the main picture is good, sometimes what you need to do is do something in a picture that's going to make your ad pop. So sometimes it's a matter of painting a door a bright color, putting potted plants in the area, or wreath on the door, something to make it look, make it stand out. And that should do the trick. By the way, the main picture, I used to think, I had a downstairs suite I was advertising in our house, and I thought that the main picture should be the kitchen, because there's this fabulous kitchen downstairs that's got 5 big windows. It's a new IKEA kitchen. It's a brilliant kitchen that you never see in rental properties, and it's huge. But I wasn't getting a lot of views. So what I did was I changed the main picture to the front door, which we have a nice red door, and I had it slightly open, and people could see pictures of wall hangings and pictures. And it was very colorful. And that's actually how we found our next tenant, because they said that they were looking for basement suite properties in our area, and ours stood out because of the red door and all of the colorful wall hangings. So, it's worth a try. It doesn't cost you anything, and gets you a tenant, all good. And then what happens if you have lots of appointments, so lots of people are looking at your property, but nobody is giving you an application form? Well, you need to talk to them and ask the people who are showing up, what would it take you to pull the trigger? What would it take you to rent this property right now? And they will tell you. For instance, we had a property in a really nice area, a really nice condo, and we did probably about 20 showings, and people were not biting. And so we started asking the people who were seeing the property, what would it take you to rent this property right now? And most of the people said, well, I can get a similar property for the same price, but it looks newer. This property looks kind of dated. And it did look kind of dated. There was a big fluorescent light in the kitchen. The hardware looks kind of 1980s. And so I passed that information on to the owner of the property, and she changed the appliances, changed the hardware, got rid of the fluorescent light, did a little bit of painting, and then we rented it within a week. So sometimes you have to add some lipstick and paint. The other thing I want to mention is that prices vary seasonally. The best time of the year to rent a property is spring to summer, and then views and showings start going down until after December, because it starts getting cold, there's a lot of snow, people don't want to move in the wintertime. So you could have the same property advertised in the spring, it might go in a week. You might advertise it in the winter, and you might have to drop the price a couple times to get a tenant, simply because not that many people are looking for a property. So it just depends on the season too. And then lastly, where should you advertise? Because this changes all the time. So I'll give you an example. When I started renting my property in Fort McMurray 18 years ago, the only place that tenants looked for a property was in the newspaper, the local newspaper. So I would post an ad in the classified ads. The paper would go out every week on a Wednesday. Probably by Friday, my phone would start ringing. But then a couple of years later, nobody posted in classifieds. Everybody was posting on Kijiji. So that's what I did. I posted on Kijiji. That's where I found my tenants. A few years later, nobody was looking for properties on Kijiji. I posted my ads for Fort McMurray in Rent Faster and Rent Board, and that's where I found my tenants. A month ago, I posted my ads on Facebook Marketplace and in Facebook Landlord or rental places, and that's where I found my tenants. So it always changes, and it's specific to areas. There are people I know in the States who post their ads on Craigslist or Zillow, or there are any number of places you can post your ad, but it's specific to your area. So you just need to do a little bit of investigating to see which area your tenants look for properties and post there. So just to summarize what we talked about who to attract in your property, how to attract, what you want with your ads, what not to say, how to calculate the rental rate, where to advertise, and how to interpret and tweak the results. So back to Paul, and he was the fellow who unfortunately was having a dilemma. And I said to him, don't worry about it, Paul. That tenant is not permanent. They will go eventually, or you'll evict them. And you just need to take your learning a little bit farther so that you learn how to screen to get only good tenants. And now we're going to talk about the screening part that Paul needed to learn. So this is step 2 in the 5-step tenant screening process. And we're going to walk through what you do to screen tenants. So once you posted the ad, people will start contacting you, and then it's a good idea for you to text them or email them and ask them if they can have a 5, 6, 7-minute conversation with you over the phone, just where you can ask them a couple questions. And once you get on the phone, then you can ask them how many pets do they have. And I usually say how many, not do you have any pets, because for some reason people are more likely to give an honest answer when you ask them for numbers. So that's why I ask that. Then I ask, is this property for you or is it for somebody else? And how many people will be occupying the property? Because you want to find out how many people are going to be in the property. Now, we used to get, when I'd be advertising condos, we used to get all kinds of interesting combinations of people who would call. So there are a lot of people who are used to living in cramped quarters. And I remember one condo, it was a 1 bedroom, and this one fellow called me and I said, "Is this property for you or for somebody else?" And he said, "Oh no, it's for me and four other guys." So it was like 5 cab drivers, and they all wanted to kind of sleep in shifts. And I knew 5 people would never ever work for that condo because it was very small and with minimum housing standards, and the landlord wanted in condo bylaws they would only accept 2 people maximum. So he could then feel free to find another property that would take 5 people, and then I didn't have to waste my time showing a property to somebody who wouldn't qualify. Then you want to ask how long of a lease do you want, and when would you like to be able to move in, and why are you moving out of your current property? That's always a telling question. People give you all kinds of answers. And would you be willing to provide work and landlord references? And would you be able to give me permission to run a credit check? Because those are things that you'll want to include on your application. And it's good for people to know up front what your requirements are so that they can either say, yes, I'm okay with that, I want to see the property, or if they're not, there again, they can move on. And then once you've decided they're a good fit, they've decided they want to see it, they're okay with your application process, then what I usually do is I send a text confirming the time, the date, and the location, and I let them know I will not come for a showing unless you email me, text me, phone me 1 hour before your appointment time to let me know that you're coming. You need to confirm that you're coming. And that's going to save you a lot of time. So if they don't text, they don't call an hour before, you're not going to show up for the appointment. And then when they're in the appointment, you want to ask them pretty much the same questions that you asked them during your pre-screen over the phone. And you're just checking for consistency, and you're making conversation, and they'll tell you all kinds of information about themselves, their lives, where they work, what they want in a property, which bedroom's going to be for who they can invite to have dinner with them in the kitchen or the dining room. They'll tell you all those things, and you can see if they're a good fit for the property, and they can see if they like the property and if they think they can work with you. And then if they decided that they like the property and they want to fill in an application form, then on your application form, you want to make sure that you have these points here: their full legal name, their current address, their current work and personal phone numbers, date of birth, 1 to 5 year work history, so they can tell you their last 3 and 4 or 5 employers if they have that many, 1 to 5 year residence history, so where they've lived the last few years, and 3 work references and 3 landlord references, and permission to run a credit check. So they need to sign and date that because that's what makes it legal for you to run a credit check. You could also have them run a credit check if you want to be on a Zoom call with them. If they don't want you to run a credit check, if you can see them run a credit check and see the credit rating, you could probably arrange a Zoom call and do that with them. That's another option, but I don't usually allow people to give me their own credit checks separately from me watching, simply because it's too easy to fake them. You should also ask on your application form for government issued identification, so a picture ID, like a driver's license, a passport, something that verifies their identity, because you need to know who's living in your property, and your insurance needs to know that you know who's living in your property. And then I always ask for a recent pay stub, and it has to be 30 days old or young, and proof of funds if they don't have a pay stub. So that could be a letter from their bank manager saying that they've got, if they're not working, that they've got the funds to pay the rent for the next year. Or it could be a letter from their accountant showing that they've got a trust fund and they could pay the rent for a year, no problem, or however long your lease is. But either way, you need some sort of verification. So to recap, there's a pre-screening process that starts over the phone, and then there's a screening when you do the showing in person and you ask the same questions. And then there's an application form that asks even more questions and asks for supporting documentation. And by the way, if you need forms for all of this stuff, they're on neldaschulte.com on 10 essential landlord forms under my offerings, and I sell them in a package, and they're very reasonably priced. And then the last step is a credit check. So you, as mentioned before, you need to receive the tenant's permission in writing with a date that allows you to run a credit check if you yourself are doing the credit check. And then once you get the credit check, it's going to show you a couple things. It's going to show you their credit rating or their FICO score, and that's a number anywhere from 1 to 1,000. 600 is usually the minimum that you will accept from a tenant. That means that they pay their bills on time every month. They might have a little bit of a high debt load, but they pay everything on time every month. If it's below 600, usually it's because they don't pay their bills on time, and or they might have collections or liens or something against their credit rating. So you don't want people with a history of not paying their bills every month. You want people who pay their bills every month on time. By the way, I could talk for ages about credit reports, and there's more thorough information on my course. I've got a course on my website called Find the Best Tenants, and it's only $28, and it goes through everything in great detail. Now, reference checks. This one kind of trips a lot of people up. It's very important to have reference checks because it shows you the person's character, their patterns, how they are to work with, how they work with their colleagues, that sort of thing. So it's very important. How many references should you have, and what kinds of references should you have? I always ask for landlord references and work references. So landlord references, you're asking for 3 landlords. So the current landlord, if they're renting, and then 2 previous ones. And then with work references, you want 3. You want supervisors or managers. So people who represent the company and who can talk to you about the person's work ethic, their dependability, their character, that kind of stuff. The other thing you should do is run social media checks on every single person who's on the tenant application form, and you'll find some very interesting information there. So Google the person's name and see what turns up in social media. For instance, if somebody says that they don't have any pets, and you look at their Facebook account, and every single picture is them with 2 dogs, you know they've got dogs. So you can bust them on that one. You can also see how they talk to people, what kinds of things they're interested in. I've seen tenant profiles where people have a big picture of a gun. Well, is that someone you want in your property? Probably not. So, and you can also cross-reference material, identity and work. LinkedIn profiles are really good for that. So you can see where somebody works and cross-reference it with what the information that's written on the tenant application form for the supervisor. Okay, work references. How do you verify work references? Well, you verify the company online. So go online and Google search the company and call the number you found online. Don't call the number for that person that's listed on the tenant application. Call the number you found online. And why would you do that? Because somebody might be putting their friend down rather than their actual supervisor. So once you've called the online phone number, then you can ask for the supervisor or manager. And if they say, oh, nobody like that works here, then you know that it's a fake reference. If they say, oh, well, that person has an individual cell number, they're out in the field, whatever, do you want their cell number? Then you know that it's the right number and or the right person. You want to prepare your work reference questions in advance. You want to ask them things like, how long have you known the tenant and in what capacity? What can you tell me about them? Let them talk. And tell me a time they were in a conflict situation and how they resolved it. And I love to ask this question because as a landlord, there are times that you see things one way and the tenant sees it another way, and you need to be able to work it out respectfully and politely. And you want to see what that person's behavior is when they get into a conflict. And then I usually ask them, if you were a landlord, would you rent to the tenant? And that's a very telling question, and you get some telling answers. And then lastly, I say, is there anything else you want to tell me that I haven't asked? And then usually they start talking. Now, the big trick to all of this is to be absolutely quiet after you've asked a question, because people get nervous with silence, and they'll talk a lot, and that's what you want. You want them to talk. You want them to give you honest information about the reference. Now we're on landlord references. So the same thing, if the person lists a property management company, then Google the property management company, find the phone number, call the phone number you found online, and verify whether that property manager's name is legit. And that's usually the easiest way to get a reference is through a property management company or an apartment building, because they have the same people working there, and they're easy to find, and they're used to doing references. If it's an individual or a private property manager, such as me, like I wouldn't be listed under a property management company name, I'd be listed under my own name for a landlord reference, then Google search the person's identity and see if they have a profile someplace and what information shows up. You can also run a title search on the property and see if the name that they're listing as a private landlord matches the name on the title search. The other thing that you can do is you can pretend that you're looking for a place to rent and call and say, I understand that you've got a one bedroom condo for rent. And if they say, no, I don't rent properties, then busted. You know that they're not a legit landlord. They're probably the tenant's friend. The landlord questions that you can ask are, could you please verify the address of where Jane tenant lived? And now the landlord can rattle it off very quickly and tell you how long they lived there, then that's pretty legit. If they really have to think and they really don't know, that's probably not a good sign. That's a red flag. You can ask how long they rented from them. Did they pay the rent on time every month? Did you receive any complaints from the neighbors or anywhere else? Did they damage the property? Did they have any pets? Did they bring in any unregistered guests or pets? And were they polite and respectful to you and to the neighbors? And would you rent to them again? So those are all really important questions to ask. And here again, don't help them with the answer. Be very quiet and make sure that they're doing most of the talking and you're doing most of the listening. You might be asking yourself at this point, why don't you ask for personal references? And my answer is that they are not reliable. I mean, if someone's listing their family friend, their brother, their sister, their mother, the parish priest, are they really going to give you an honest answer about whether this person is a good tenant? Probably not. So it's better to go with work references and landlord references. With work references, the person that you speak to knows that they're representing their position in the company, and they also know that they're representing a company, so they're more likely to give you an honest answer. So let's review. What have we looked at during the tenant screening process? You've pre-screened the tenant over the phone. You've met them in person. You've seen how they acted towards you during the application process. You've seen their credit score. So you know whether they pay their bills on time. You know if they're collections, liens, bankruptcies. You've seen all of that. You talk to their employer. You talk to their landlords. And you run social media checks on them, on everybody on their application form. So you've got a ton of information to have formed a really good impression of a tenant. And then you'll ask yourself, do you want to work with them? Is this somebody you want to have a long-term relationship with as a landlord? So in summary, we've talked about advertising, pre-screening questions, the application form, the credit check, and lastly, verifying references. And this is a question I get asked by newbie landlords all the time. Oh my God, Nelda, won't this process scare people off? And my answer to you is no. Actually, good tenants are always happy to jump through all the hoops and to go through an application process because they know they're going to look like shining stars at the end of it. They know they've got good references. They know they've got a good credit score. They're happy to show that to you. Bad tenants, however, will get scared off, and that's exactly what you want. Or if they're a bad tenant and they're not scared off and they're trying to scam you, you'll be able to find them. If you're running a credit check, you're doing landlord references, Google searches, tenant or work references, you're going to catch them in a lie because there's so many checkpoints in this process. And then you'll know that they can just move on and that you haven't been scammed. No questions? I have a couple questions I get asked. I'm just going to go over them that people have emailed me. Do you get better results having a professional photographer take pictures of the rental property? Not necessarily. I've seen people who take great pictures with their phone, and I've taken pictures with my phone that work perfectly fine. So as long as you're getting the right angle and the right lighting, you don't necessarily have to have a professional photographer. Um, what should you do if you have trouble writing ads? Well, practice. Look at other people's ads, sort of copy what they have, but put your own information in. There are ways to kind of shortcut there. Um, what if you don't know what tenants you want? Well, think about your property and think about the neighborhood and look at other similar properties and see what kinds of tenants they're trying to attract, and that'll let you know what tenants are good for your neighborhood. Um, and then do all online platforms have the same pricing tool that Redfaster does? No, they don't. But you can find pricing lots of different ways. So it doesn't just have to be on Redfaster. You can look at comparative pricing on Kijiji and Craigslist on any number of platforms. And I think that's it. For those of you who stayed through to the end, I'm giving you 2 free editable documents. If you email me at nelda@neldaschulte.com, I will send you a credit check editable authorization form that you can send to tenants and they can sign and date. And I will send you my 10 work reference questions for free, so you can have those to use for your own practice. And if you like this webinar, it's available in a detailed step-by-step version, a longer version, on neldaschulte.com. Find the Best Tenants Masterclass. And it's only $28, and you can replay it as many times as you need to learn all the steps or to fine-tune your skills. And my website again is www.neldaschulte.com. I hope you learned something today. If you'd like to receive other landlord tips and resources, you can join the community at neldaschulte.com membership. There's tons of free resources there for you, including forums, even of course. And I'd like to thank you very much for attending. My name is Nelda Schulte. My website is neldaschulte.com. And I look forward to supporting you in your landlord business and helping you achieve profitability. Thank you so much for letting me support you tonight.